Hello everyone, Jazz the Gamer here, and today I'm here to start up a new series called A Youngster's Outlook on every Street Fighter game, where I give exactly that, as I talk about each mainline Street Fighter game individually, to talk about what they do really well, what I don't like about them, and just overall give a 1 out of 10 rating on each one. Today we're going to start off with the very first Street Fighter game, as well as every single version of Street Fighter 2. By the way, I should probably mention before we get into this, we are not going to be counting ports or re-releases, because then we would just be here all year. Or decade. But without further ado, let's get right into it! First up is Street Fighter 1. I hate this game. I'm not kidding. This is the only Street Fighter I actively don't enjoy playing. Why? Why wouldn't it be? I don't think I need to tell you why this game is bad, but for the sake of finality and purely out of spite, I'll do it. The ground movement is slow. This jump arc sucks. All of your attacks suck, except for special moves. These are easily the worst part of the game. Like, never mind the fact that you have to align your chakras, find inner peace, and train with Shaolin monks just to throw a goddamn fireball. When's the last time you've seen a Hadouken chop off this much of someone's freaking health bar? These aren't tools in your arsenal, they're cheat codes that you found on the manual and started cheesing out wins with, which makes someone that can do these consistently virtually unbeatable. Thankfully, this may almost never happen, because A, that's impossible, and B, that requires two people deciding to play Street Fighter 1. The most I can say positively about this game is that the stages do look good, especially for the time. This game came out the same year as Metal Gear, Contra, and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, and it still manages to stand head and shoulders above the games of its time. Unfortunately, looks alone will not save this game from my wrath. 1 out of 10. Next up is Street Fighter 2: The World Warriors. World Warrior feels very bare bones, especially by 90s fighting game standards. Then again, anything's better than this, so I'd call it an improvement. It is slow, you can't do mirror matches, which is a fascinating thing, and overall, it just feels very incomplete, especially when compared to everything else down the line, and even the next game. Overall, 3 out of 10. Champion Edition is a much more complete package compared to World Warrior, and is practically the baseline for what a functional fighting game should look like. Unfortunately, functional does not mean great. While not bad by any means, it still lacks that special something to make it stand out from the other entries, in the way that Alpha has custom combos and 3 has parries. Street Fighter 2 didn't have anything like that until Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo added super moves. As well, adding the boss characters is pretty cool, I will admit. Sagat being a different take on Ryu and Ken, that works pretty well. Balrog is probably the first boxer in fighting games, and them being some of my favorites in the genre makes me like him that much more. Vega, who is a really cool looking character, and he thankfully wasn't a problem until Super Turbo. More on that later. And Bison was straight up a problem in this game. Insane stun on everything, a practical infinite combo, and Psycho Crusher does insane block damage. Despite that, I am glad these guys became staples of the franchise, and the game itself is pretty fun. 4 out of 10. Now we're talking. This game is almost the same as Champion Edition, including small balance changes like nerfing the shtick out of Bison, and a general speed increase. I could have sworn this game was faster when I first played it, but maybe it was because it was my first time playing and it was late at night, I don't know. This version was made to compete with bootlegs of Street Fighter 2 that were being made, which we now know as Street Fighter 2 Rainbow Edition, a genuinely hysterical fighting game to watch footage of because of how broken they decided to make this bootleg, which alongside some questionable changes, also made the game faster. Hyperfighting is overall a much better feeling game than Champion Edition and especially World Warrior, and I personally think that this was when Street Fighter started to become great. 6 out of 10. Just as Capcom made great progress innovating the genre, they decided to drop the ball entirely. New Challengers is one of the first instances of Capcom taking 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, as it's much slower than hyper fighting. Wait a second, wasn't the whole point of making the game faster to compete with the bootlegs? Now they're just giving people more incentive to play the bootleg. What kind of failure in logic has to occur for that to happen? I would talk about the new challengers themselves, but that just feels disrespectful. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to say about this. Like, it's not a particularly outstanding game in any way, shape, or form, and it's not anything that I wanted to go back to because of how interesting it was, but just to figure out what was wrong with it. But then I realized nothing was wrong with it, it's just that nothing was right. It's just painfully mediocre, as I like to call it, and New Challengers feels like the black sheep of the Street Fighter II series. The most interesting thing I can say about it is the fact that it is probably one of the first instances of a combo counter in fighting games, so that's honestly pretty cool, but other than that, 3 out of 10. Super Street Fighter II Turbo, or Super Turbo, ST for short, is the best rendition of the Street Fighter II series. No joke. Not only did this introduce throw teching, a maneuver where if you throw just after your opponent does, you'll take less damage and land back on your feet, but it also introduced a new mechanic that would become a staple of not just Street Fighter, but the genre as a whole: super moves. And as a fan of super moves in fighting games, it's really cool to see how this is how they started. And yeah, they're all pretty cool. Not only that, but I think now is the perfect time to introduce the new challengers themselves that were introduced in New Challengers. This just feels like a much more respectful manner to do it in. We got T-Hawk, this giant Mexican man with indigenous roots who works well as a second Zangief. Like, holy smokes, this man is pretty cool. I'm honestly kind of sad that he often gets shafted in a lot of Street Fighter games, either not appearing in them or just not really being all that interesting. DJ, who is a terrifying mix of Guile-like zoner and mix-up monster. This guy, even the wiki states that he has just secretly been very broken this entire time, and I'm kind of inclined to agree. Also, thank goodness for his big old grin. If it wasn't for that, he probably wouldn't have much in the ways of a personality, at least at first glance. Because holy smokes is this design boring. Thank flipping goodness that Street Fighter 6 looked at this guy and said, hey, wait a second, this guy doesn't look like a DJ. Let's fix that. And then they gave him the best redesign in the series. It's awesome, it's beautiful. Next up we got Fei Long, the first ever Rekka character. I'm not even going to try to explain what a Rekka is, I'm just going to throw on the screen an explanation of it directly from the fighting game glossary. And let me tell you, it is straight up a Christmas miracle that all three hits combo into each other, especially considering this game's age. Like, it could have very easily just, not have worked. Thank goodness it does. And finally, Cammy, the first proper rushdown character in Street Fighter and maybe even fighting games as a whole. In that case, dang, is this such a cool character. It really is a shame that she's not very strong in this game, because, yeah, I think she's really cool. Moving on to the gameplay, Super Turbo is probably the best feeling in the Street Fighter II series. It's fast, responsive, and I don't mind walking in this game. Let me explain. So, dashing wasn't really invented until Charlie was the first character to ever do it in Street Fighter Alpha. And then in Street Fighter 3, it just became kind of something that everyone could do, and every game since, every character could dash. However, that just kind of invalidated walking as a whole in a lot of scenarios that weren't, just playing the neutral game. Because if you wanted to approach, dashing was the best way to do it. And hey, I don't mind dashing at all. In fact, I would consider it a net positive. But I don't mind its absence in these older titles, especially because walking is just generally faster than it is in a lot of other games. So, yeah, while I'm not saying dashing is a bad thing, I don't mind walking in this game because it's fast and responsive, and you can move back and forth really easily without any kind of delay, and that just feels really good, especially because a lot of games like Street Fighter 5 and 6, oddly enough, I don't know what it is, those later games do not make walking the most interesting thing in the world. It's fine, but it's not quite as interesting as Street Fighter 2's take on walking or Alpha. So I'm just saying. And finally, the single coolest idea in this game that I wish was in more games, but I can see why it's not. old characters. By hovering over the character on Character Select and inputting special code, you can play as versions of each character from older entries in the series. This is a really cool idea and nearly doubles the amount of characters in the game. And a lot of these old characters end up being very distinct from their newer counterparts. For instance, I play old Fei Long, and I actually prefer him over new Fei Long, mainly because almost all of his normal attacks are special cancelable, and this can lead to some really interesting neutral, where I just get like one crouch medium kick, or maybe like a jump in, and then like, bam, there goes your health bar. I am just like ripping that thing off the UI at this point. It's awesome. One of the main downsides of old characters is that they lose access to super moves and they can't tech throws. Unfortunately, most of the old characters are side grades at best and straight up downgrades at worst, but old Ken and Sagat actually end up being upgrades compared to their newer counterparts. This is a really cool idea, and it has legs. I can just see why it's almost never been in any fighting game since. For instance, if a weak character got buffed or a strong character got nerfed, being able to pick an older version of them would invalidate the point of doing either. And 2, it can only really work with direct sequels that build upon the prior game, rather than overhauls that change system mechanics and just the game in general, which tends to be a lot of fighting game sequels ever since the concept of title updates practically died sometime in the Street Fighter V era. It's kind of a shame. This is a cool idea, but I understand. Alternate versions of characters, I just find to be a really interesting idea, and this idea would eventually get expanded with isms in Street Fighter Alpha, variations in Mortal Kombat, and now, in the new Avatar: The Last Airbender fighting game, support characters coming in, which is just such a cool idea that I love so much, and I'm so glad that this idea eventually got expanded into these, mechanics, because I think they're sick. Alright, now, before I give my closing thoughts on this game as a whole, I just kinda wanted to mention some flaws I have with not really just Super Turbo, but like almost the entire Street Fighter II series as a whole. But I do mainly want to focus on Super Turbo because that's where these flaws are the most apparent. Because, this is the version of Street Fighter II that I've played the most. Starting off, throws are actual bullcrap. And I'm not even kidding or exaggerating even a little bit. These things are insane. No startup, no whiff animation, ludicrous range and damage for a flipping throw of all things. But also, how Super Turbo introduced throw teching, which is a way to make sure that throws did less damage and, made sure you actually landed back on your feet? Well, funny thing about that, there's actually a second type of throw called holds. And these things range in damage and length depending on whether or not you mash or, whether or not the attacker mashed. These things cannot be teched. And, in some characters, this can lead to looping throws. I'm looking at you, Balrog. Seriously, it is insane the amount of times that I think I have the upper hand on my opponent, and then all of a sudden they just chuck me halfway across the screen, and I'm just back to square one. It is so annoying. It is so ridiculous. When I think I have a punish on someone, they just throw me. It's insane. Why are you throwing me like this? Maybe it's a skill issue on my end, right? Maybe. But it's still such a headache to deal with sometimes. And I guess that does lead to my second issue with Street Fighter II Turbo. This game is broken. Sure, that can kind of be a part of the game's charm, and a lot of people do interpret it that way, myself included mostly, but there are some things about it that make me think that maybe this is going a bit too far. Especially when you consider that, a lot of the top tiers are kind of unfair. Balrog is fine, aside from his throw loop. There's nothing really wrong with Balrog in this game. Sagat is flipping Zoner Supreme. And that is no joke, exaggeration, and I'm talking about old Sagat specifically, because this guy is flipping insane. Just keeps throwing fireballs. It's insane. Oh, and then, of course, how could I forget the problem character of Super Turbo, Vega. Vega is insane, right? He's never going to be a great character again, and Super Turbo is the reason why. He is paying for his sins that he committed in that game, because this dude is ridiculous. Crazy jumps. The flip dive is absolutely insane if you don't have a reversal to thwack him out of the air, and even if you do, there can be a lot of guesswork in it. Heck, that's even considering if you have one, because some characters just flat out don't. Heck, some characters don't even have ways to stop him from doing all his nonsense. And I actually use him as a secondary character. Okay, listen. A man can only take so many brawlers and rushdowns and all-arounders and spiked brick walls that throw bricks at people. Let me have this for once. Like, I don't know, this dude is just kind of fun. And he's not the broken win button that a lot of people who have played this game would probably make him out to be. Because there is counterplay. It's not very common, but it exists. You know, some characters can actually screw this guy up a little bit, right? Like Old Ken, his Shoryuken is kind of a nightmare for him to deal with, as shown by this piece of footage right here that I have of him. So, yeah, there's that, I guess. Besides, I play Old Fei Long for Pete's sake, a character without a projectile or an anti-projectile tool in a game dominated by projectiles. Give me a break, man. To summarize my opinions on Super Turbo, this is an absolutely fantastic game, and possibly the crowning achievement of not just Street Fighter, but fighting games as a whole, especially at the time. This game is still being played almost 30 years from now, and it will probably still be played another 30 years from now. What a great game. 7 out of 10. And that concludes a youngster's outlook on every Street Fighter game, at least for now. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for notifications on future videos. I'm jazzed to have been here, and I'll see you next time.